Good evening, everybody. Keith here. Hoping everybody's having a good day, enjoying life, living life, loving life. Enjoying the nicer weather that we've got. Finally. Thank God winter's over. Before I get started here on this penmanship video, I want to tell everybody I appreciate your concern, but I assure you I'm a big boy. I can take care of myself. But again, I appreciate all the concern in regards to my hiatus. Like I said, everybody, I hope everybody's enjoying the nice weather. That's basically what it was, is some cabin fever. I've been at this research stuff for a long time now, and it's just nice to be out and about, spending more time outdoors and doing other things. As well as something else I want to mention in regards to jurisdiction and authority and the ID, birth certificate, social security account, and all that. When it comes down to that, we have to realize that the government, being a corporation, though we do have the judicial branch of the government, the way it operates, understand that word, operates. The judicial branch of the federal government behaves in a certain way, whereas the corporate branch operates commercially, totally, and in its entirety. So everything that comes through the courts, you notice everything's district courts, district court this, district court that, whatever. And a lot of times you'll notice things on your licensings and stuff. Like if you get a marriage license in most states, it'll tell you right there on the paperwork that it's being done in a probate court. What's a probate court? Probate court is a court of wills. And if you don't have a will drawn up, the state's going to draw one up for you. And that's that marriage license in its simplicity. In its simplicity, the state takes fiduciary responsibility over that relationship as a quasi-contract. And if you don't understand this stuff, then that quasi-contract affects the rest of your life, unless you annul it. Annul it or rescind your signature. Either one's viable. But I recently and I'm hoping it works. I can't say that it's going to, but it should by its pretense under annulment laws. One of the prerequisites is that the information for all parties be valid and disclosed. The problem is that the disclosure isn't happening when it comes to the English language and the different languages that they use on these forms and licenses and permits and registration and all this. And that's why we have these, a million plus codes, rules, regulations, acts, edicts, ordinances, and this and that. So, and those are all just various different jurisdictions. But when it comes to yourself, you're the only jurisdiction. None of those other jurisdictions apply to you. Jurisdiction, remember when you break down the word jurisdiction etymologically, it stands for right words. And if the words pertain to a corporate fiction that you have no involvement in, when it comes to no valid involvement, when it comes to the birth certificate and the construct of the Social Security account being a pass-through entity to operate commercially and not being disclosed as that. It's disclosed as a retirement account. And yet at the same time they don't disclose that it's a commercial operation for being, and that they classify you as a Medicare qualified government employee. Those are non-disclosure elements that are valid in all cases of annulment. Annulment stands, it's the same thing as ab initio. If it wasn't good to begin with, then it's not valid throughout. You can't make something valid over a course of time. That's why they have this thing. A lot of people understand the grandfather clause. A lot of people came to understand the grandfather clause way back when they started messing with the drinking laws, changing the drinking ages and stuff. And those that were already of age to drink before they passed the law and then extended the drinking age from 18 to 21 were grandfathered in because they were already eligible. Okay? And that concept right there is a maxim of law. You cannot, and that's what they do, is they legislate your rights away. And that's a prime example of the proof on the face of the record of that fraud. When you're dealing with, like I said, the marriage license, it's done in a probate court. So when you're dealing with your own will, the only true law is free will. So if somebody else is trying to place their will on you and saying that's your will, then you're the one that's not stating your will. And that's what it comes down to. But again, it's the breakdown of the English language and how we're not taught the proper context of that English language and how to break down these words. And with that, I want to start with this book. And I've already done a couple videos on some other interesting books, but this one here is called Real Penwork, Self-Instructor in Penmanship. Understand that word. Understand penmanship. And again, I'm gonna iterate the importance of the identity thing in properly identifying parties involved in a case when it comes to that legal entity by clarifying the works of both Samuel Clemens when he provided his penmanship. He did so under the guise of Mark Twain. Prince did it under the guise of a symbol. So as we get into this book on penmanship, I want you to understand, and this is one thing that I discussed in another video previously as well. You have trademark, which is related to word mark, which is related to letter mark, which is related to symbol marks. Okay? And letter marks, letter marks are used for number marks as well. Grammatical marks, we'll call them grammar marks. Letter marks include grammar marks and numerical marks. And so anyway, we get into it. We open the cover. Let me show you the front cover. It's an old book. This is from, I don't know what edition this is, but this was originally written in 1881. And you can see it's got a nice fancy little cover, but it's a very old book. And as we look on the very inside cover, it's got a name up here in the top corner we're not going to expose because it's a household member. But there, the very opening cover, you'll see and so before we get into this, I want you to understand that when you use penmanship, it's an art form. People loved Samuel Clemens' form of art when he put it down on paper through his penmanship. Okay? And this is the same thing. It's penmanship. All it is an art form. Okay? When we talk about languages, the language itself is not considered an art form. It is separate and totally different as a language. It has a purpose. Its use is for a specific purpose. And when we start talking about artwork, it is a different purpose. Okay? So remember, penmanship is just a different purpose. It's an artwork. Okay? When we're talking about wordsmithing, we're talking about same kind of art form in a different context. We're creating words and stringing them together to create an artwork. Samuel Clemens did an artwork. Prince did artworks by doing it in song verse. Same thing. You're creating your own artwork. You are the creator. It's your will. It's your stroke of the pen. Make sure people understand your intent. And so when we get into it, we look at the first page and we see it's just a presented to is what it says, and it's got a name on there. I doubt you can read that. It's in pencil, kind of unclear, but it was presented to her in 1970. So she's had this book for 48 years, almost 49 years. And we get into it, and it talks about the real penwork self-instructor in penmanship. Knowles and Maxim is who published it. Knowles and Maxim. And you can see they did a really fine work on all of this throughout the entire book. And of course, because it's a book on penmanship. And then it gets into explaining the book, how we came to publish it. It teaches and shows you, and a lot of this you have to remember, like I said, this was originally published in 1881, so the English is a little bit different. And I found in many spots through reading this that they reiterate themselves multiple times trying to explain the same point. And they'll do it throughout paragraph after paragraph. So a lot of it is redundant, as is, and this is one of the practices of the Peanuts Gang artist Charles. I can't remember his last name off the top of my head right now, but he would take an object, or no, it wasn't Charles, was it? Maybe it was. Maybe it was Walt Disney. One of the two would take an object and draw it 3 times from 3 different perspectives. And that way he would refine his art. He refined his art form by repetition. And that's what this book is basically telling you to do, according to the various different scripts. And I said scripts that you can see and come up with your own self. You can copy others, the script from other people, the design, the art form. This is most often done through calligraphy. Calligraphy is a penmanship. It's a form of penmanship. And this picture here, this is another, like I said, it's a form of penmanship. You're using a pen and you're creating an art form. Okay. And this page here, it talks about how to sit at the desk, how to hold your pen. It discusses, and this is a very available book. You can get this online. It's very easily accessible. Many copies out there you can find. You might even be able to find one at the local library. All the movements used in writing thoroughly illustrated and explained. And it talks about how you hold your pen and use your arm, not just your wrist. You see a lot of artists will have some kind of a bar that they use to slide their arm across when they're drawing, a smooth bar, so that they can fluidly keep their arm at an even level. Keeps their pen strokes equal and even. And it says exercise for practice on the finger, slide and muscular movements combined. So in other words, what they're telling you, what they're talking about there is using your muscular movements here as you slide your arm across the paper, making the various different art marks. And then here we start talking about analysis, and this is where they start explaining the actual construction of each mark. Okay? And we see here it's got a ruler, and it talks about 3/8 of an inch as opposed to 1/8 of an inch in regards to the upper and lowercase letters. All of your uppercase letters, your capital letters are all going to be consistently 3/8 of an inch, supposedly. This is, and again, you see mathematics works in this construct here. But then they go on to show you the scale, how much to slant your letters. And this is one thing I want people to realize too, is part of the indoctrination when we think about these profile professionals, the FBI profile specialists, when they talk about handwriting analysis and coming up with somebody's personality according to how they write, according to their penmanship. And here they're teaching us to write at a slant to the right. You ask an FBI profile specialist what that means in regards to their personality profile, and yet they're indoctrinating the kids. When they teach cursive to our kids, this is what they teach. They teach them to write at a slant, look italic, look like it's italics, and they call it cursive. And that's one of the main things about this video I want to point out, is that it is not common English. So when you sign your name on a document in cursive, you're putting 2 languages on a document your own self. If you're going to stick to the rules of one-to-one communication, you have to make sure everybody's speaking English, not cursive. That's what the that's one of the things about what it was the Native Americans talking about the forked tongue. We're talking about forked pens. Then it goes on to talk about the principles and the capital letters, and it thoroughly analyzes and explains each one, and it goes on to analyze the capital letters, and it does so by separating them into 3 different groups. Principal and capitals A, N, M, T, F, and K. And if you look at those letters, you'll see that each of those letters has nothing but straight or diagonal marks. Period. That's it. Then the capitals H, P, B, R, G, and S, thoroughly analyzed and explained. And again, you'll notice most of those have just lines, but some have some curves now. Then we go on to capitals C, X, W, Q, Z, V, U, and Y. And you'll notice this one is using, you're using multiples, W, V, Q, multiple curves. You've got a right curve, a left curve, and then a squiggly, Z, multiples of those lines. Then it goes on, all the small letters thoroughly analyzed and explained. And again, it goes through and it tells you, here I'll first, the first principle is the straight line. And it shows you a straight line 1/8 of an inch at, they call it a straight line, and technically it's a straight line, but it's at an angle. Okay? And I think they somewhere quoted at a 52-degree angle. Okay? And then they show an invex curve and a convex curve. And then they show a loop, like an H loop, as opposed, or an L loop. But this is an H loop because it comes down and goes straight to the bottom instead of making a loop over for the next letter, blah, 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 or coming up in a hump. And it just basically explains how to construct your different letters according to penmanship. And when we talk about penmanship, you'll notice it's all a flourish, and cursive is a penmanship. It's an art form. It is not common English, block lettering, period. No ifs, ands, or doubts about it. And I'll show you, this is, it's kind of hard to tell the exact difference, but this here they call these business letters. And again, I want you to understand, letters are different when it comes to language. Letters are specific and particular. These are cursive letters, or as they call them up here, business letters. Whereas common English is block letters. Okay? Block letters. Okay, so we have business letters, and then they change from letters to Spencerian script. Okay, let me show you the difference. Business letters. Business letters. This is more like italics. When you see italics printed through a computer on a piece of paper, on a computer program, you'll notice, or even on a typewriter, I believe most times, you'll see a tiny little space. And I don't know if that's done on purpose or not, but you'll notice business letters, these are, and I'm assuming that if you use it the same as cursive, it would look the same as cursive. But then, when you notice they use Spencerian script, they are specifically connected. This is cursive. This is cursive. Okay? It's not calligraphy. It's script. Cursive. It's scripted for you. Okay? And again, Spencerian script. And like I said in the thing there, I got a little surprise for people in regards to promissory notes. And I found it right here in this book of penmanship. And what I want you to know, I don't know much about the publishers of this book, Knowles and Maxim, but I only imagine that if they know this much about script, business letters, penmanship, that they have some kind of background or foreknowledge of English. Having some kind of grammatical background study, some college or something, because it would only make sense. I don't see a plumber writing a book on penmanship. You know what I mean? But anyway, look at that. It says promissory note. Okay? It's got a dollar amount up here. And it's got the name of a city and a date. It says New York, November 15th, 1866. And like I said, this book was originally published in 1881, so it would make sense that they would use an example of a promissory note and specifically remember this date. I recognize this date. This is after the incorporation of the United States. And they're talking about promissory note. Okay? Now, if it's grammatically correct, this is as simple as a promissory note gets. And this is one of the things I've been trying to tell people. This is as simple as a promissory note gets, and you get an example of it in this book. It says $4,298. New York, November 15th, 1866. At sight. At sight. Pay to And it's got upper and lower case in script, cursive, James H. Campbell. And then it says on order. Okay, and what I want you people to look up is order paper. A check is an order. It says pay to the order. Promissory note is pay to the order. This is order. This is what pay to the order. This is an order paper. Okay? And it's telling you, it's giving an order. Welcome to McDonald's. Can I take your order, please? Yeah. Here's my promissory note. This is my order. You asked if you could take my order. Here's my order, bitch. This is what we need to start doing to the government. Okay. $4,298 value received. Williams Packard, C.J. Rainbright Company, Rainbridge Company, 445 Broadway, New York. And that's it. That's the promissory note. New York, it's got a dollar amount, it's got a date, a place, and the parties. James H. Campbell, Williams Packard, C.J. Bainbridge and Company, and an address. It's as simple as it gets. That's all the information you need for a promissory note. Here's another one. It says $1,700. $1,700, and again, it's got the dollar amount first, and then a city and a date. And this one here says New York, October 3rd, 1866. And this one states it a little bit differently. It says 6 months from date, I promise to pay William M. King Jr. or order $1,700 value received. Thomas Hunter. Now, what I want you to understand about this second one, you notice the first one it said order, and then it said Williams Packard, and then it gave a corporate name, C.J. Bainbridge and Company. I want people to understand the only people that can deal with the only things that can deal in currency is something in commerce, and that is a corporate fiction. Okay, so what they did in the first one is he promised to pay it on order, and that order was shown on order from the C.J. Bainbridge Company, 445 Broadway, New York. He stated who it was going to be ordered from. He's the one paying it on order to Williams R. Packard from C.J. Bainbridge and Company. Okay, and he gave the address. Now, on the second one, it doesn't give any such thing. It doesn't give on order of who. It just says, it says it in different words, promise to pay William M. King Jr. or order $1,700 order or value received. Okay? So in other words, this is more of a contractual thing that at a later date, when that date comes, 6 months from the date, I promise to pay. So he's going to pay in 6 months. Or he's going to order it paid. Understand the wording there. He's referring only to himself, promising to pay or order. Who's he going to order? His person. These people back in the day when they were writing these promissory notes knew what the words meant, and they made it very simple, and people understood what they meant by these very simple words. And that's all you got to do is get rid of all that ambiguation out of your mind. Quit fucking dealing with the fucking million of codes thinking that they apply to you. They don't. Jurisdiction belongs to you according to your words. The right words for you. Period. Okay, so now we get on to the next part. And it talks, and the rest of this really isn't all that important except to go back and reiterate the thing about artwork. This next section, it just says select verses for autograph albums. And then it's got a department of ornamental penmanship. And we talk about ornamental penmanship when they put all the flares. And I used to do this when I was in prison. I used to put flares on my envelopes. I used to do the ornamental flares on the corners of my letters and stuff, just as artwork. A lot of guys do that in prison. And then it goes on, and we're using instead of script, we're like it referred to here, flare. We're going to use flares, ornamental artwork. Ornamental artwork. Again, ornamental artwork. And that's all it is. That's all penmanship is. That's all signatures are. Ornamental artwork. Ornamental artwork that can be authenticated, particularly in arenas such as sports memorabilia, the movie industry, performing arts industries and stuff like that when they're doing autographs. Everybody has their own autograph, and most often it varies slightly from autograph to autograph. But if you have true penmanship, that autograph is always the same. You take your time and you have fluid movement. That is a memory movement. And so your autograph always remains the same, or your signature always remains the same. They call it an autograph. It's actually a signature when you do it in cursive. It's an art form when you do it like a doctor and can't really read it. You just do an art, a little squiggly. You just do a little squiggly. A certain squiggly that people recognize. Squiggly's like Prince when he made his symbol. Squiggly that somebody could recognize. Only he made them recognize it. And then it goes on, after the flare, the ornamental process, it talks about tracing process. And we all know about that. That's onion paper, the real light, thin paper. And you can just trace over somebody else's artwork. And like I talked earlier about the artist, the cartoon guy, and he repeated his work. He did his work 3 times from 3 different angles. And that's the basics of the flare work and the penmanship, is you do all these little things and you do them repeatedly. And you learn how to make all the different little marks of your letters. When you go back through the analysis part of the capital letters, and you learn how to make the one side of your O as verse to your other side of your O. And you learn how you make your own strokes of the pen. Some people say use this way. It's like the toilet paper. Is it forward or backward? You know, some people make their strokes up. Some people make them down. Some people make one continuous stroke for an O. Some people stick to that down stroke. Down on this side, down on that side. Or upstroke, up on this side, up on that side. It's just your own preference. It's all it is. It's your artwork. It's your jurisdiction. It's the right word for you. It's the right form for you. So then when we start talking about artwork, this is what we're really talking about when it comes to penmanship. And we've got several pages here, and it's just going to keep going on and on. And why would we have this is over half the book now. We're at the halfway mark, and the rest of the book is completely on drawings. Completely on drawings. Okay, so when we talk about, and here we're, again, more artwork. You notice the whole first part of this book has been all black and white, and now we're getting into color. Color has its own context of meaning and hierarchy as well. Remember that. That's using multiple languages. Multiple languages. multiple ways of feeling within the same visual context. You see a word in black, and it has a visual context that means one thing. You see those same words, and if they're written in blue, they have a different context. You see those same words, and they're written in red, they have a different context. They're being spoken in different languages. So understand this stuff. Within the variables of the English language, you can write in red, blue, pink. You can write in rainbow colors if you want, as long as it's block English lettering. And that doesn't affect the language barrier. Understand that part. So again, back to the artwork. This is penmanship. Because you're using a pen, and you're creating this multiple strokes that all look the same. It's called penmanship. How do you guide that vessel? That pen is your vessel. Before any piece of paper can become a vessel, it has to be written on. What words are you putting on? What words are you putting down? Are you using hierarchy of language? Are you using their form? Are you crossing out the terms on their form and using a handwritten term of your own above it that has a higher jurisdiction? Are you able to go through their forms and change them according to the words that mean something to you and convey that meaning to them so that they understand it on a one-to-one basis? Common English. Get rid of all the penmanship. Get rid of all the artwork. Again, I'm just showing you the rest of these pictures because it shows you half the book on penmanship. Half the book on penmanship, and it's all about artwork. And this is what we talk about when we think about the Bible verse that says, "Ye are creators." You have to create your own artwork. And so, when you take a thought from here and you convey it to a vibration that somebody else can feel, or you convey it to the stroke of a pen where somebody else can feel it, they have to feel it properly. Again, we're just going to keep going with the artwork. This guy here was very adept at doing the strokes for the faces. Very well at putting them in proportion. And then here's one. I want everybody to look back at the Campbell soup cans, the old Campbell soup cans, and tell me if this doesn't remind you of that kind of artwork. This is the artwork from the early 1800s. This is how they drew. And it wasn't called cartoons back then. It was called artwork. Today we see this stuff, and people put all kinds of fantastical caricatures to their faces and stuff, color it in and call it cartoons. It's artwork. Here we got a little bit more in depth of the strokes. They're using many more strokes. So it gives a much deeper color and deeper shade. And here's one that's very interesting because as you notice all these others, you notice all the multiple different strokes used and combined together to make these all these previous pictures. Check this one out. And it's very to me, it's very spiritual, the picture that they used. And not because of the picture that they used, but just the context of who they used. This whole thing, see that little squiggly at the bottom? all done with a single stroke of the pen. One stroke of the pen can create quite an interesting thing. One stroke. How much ink do you have in your pen? How much ink? How much ink do you have in your pen? And then we get into the, again, color. This doesn't seem to be showing up. This book is so old and faded, it's kind of hard to tell, but these pictures here are using red, blue, black, and green for color. And then in the very back, we get into very artistic lettering using nature. Artwork of wood. And they just created the alphabet using pieces of wood with little branches and stuff coming off. And then, like I spoke earlier, calligraphy. You have calligraphy that has various different styles as well. These are the last pages. This one here says marking alphabet. Then we have fantastic artwork with calligraphy. I believe those are kind of like an old English lettering. And then here, this I find funny. This is the last page of the book that came out, but look at the two drawings there. And remember, I spoke to I briefly mentioned the thing about thing about tracing. They talked about tracing in here, and that's just the onion paper, and that's what this was referencing to. This is referencing his freehand and his tracing, and supposedly this is a photograph. Their description of a photograph is actually a crosshatch. Somebody did their very best touch-up work on a photograph that they could for print. Anyway, that's it for the penmanship. I just wanted to express to people, the importance of penmanship and the fact that it's all artwork. If you want to be really creative, get down to the artwork of the words themselves that you're using. You have to be creative with them and know that the words that you're using are being used as you intend them to. Okay? The words that somebody else is using against you, anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Okay? So if you're going to be saying shit, you need to be saying the right things. Understand this stuff. Anytime they try to stop me or get called on me, they ask me for my ID. I'm sorry, I don't have an ID. And I don't know a single law on this earth that requires me to have an ID. The only policies that require anyone to have an ID are policies that apply to employees of that corporation, because they fall under that jurisdiction. If I am not an employee, then I'm not required to have an ID. Even you McDonald's employees, look at your ID. That nice little name tag up here. I'm thinking it's been so long since I've been in a restaurant, I don't know what they are, but I believe they're all capital letters. At least when you get your check, it comes to first, middle, and last. First, second, last. A corporate entity. And you're still not signing with a qualified signature. Not only that, but you're giving up your right by accepting electronic deposits. You're bypassing your right to give a qualified signature to make sure that transaction is done appropriately by giving up your right to even have a check in physical form. An actual document. Now you have to wonder, now you have to be aware of the possibility of the hackers that get into these systems, and because they hacked, whether they hacked information and stole it and the company no longer has it, but whether they hacked it and now they have the information, now the company has to destroy the information or revert to other methods of changing employee information. And if you're an employee, you're subject to that change as well. And they can change it at their whim. And now you're no longer Keith Orland Little, you're Keith Little. But do you know who they intend you to be? Are those words for you? Is it your penmanship on there? Is that your signature? Did you use a pen and man that ship? Did you use a pen to place yourself on that ship? Penmanship, very important. You want to create vessels, you want to create your own persons, you better start using your ink, not somebody else's. The right words for you. Your own artwork. Symbol marks, letter marks, word marks, trademarks. Who are you trading marks with? And what marks are they and what do they mean? Understand this stuff, people. When it comes to jurisdiction, it's so important because that's where you're getting screwed, is the words. Everything's supposed to come down to a one-to-one communication, and if you're sitting there trying to read some of this stuff, I had a hard time reading that promissory note. But when it comes to reading something like that, that's very detailed and very descriptive, but simply it says fish. At least in English it says fish. Some people might interpret it to say carp. Some people might interpret it to say goldfish. Some people interpret that as a bird. Others would interpret it as a finch. Some would interpret it as a sparrow. You don't know. That's why you got to use your own words. That's why you got to provide your own ink, your own penmanship. But it's got to come from here. Not from somebody else's pen, not from somebody else's word. Your own. I need you guys to really start thinking about this stuff. Because you're the one putting pen to paper, not me. I don't sign shit. You can ask me questions all you want. Officer pulls me out, like I said, they come up, they get called on me or have any reason to stop me and ask me for ID. I'm sorry, I don't have one. Well, what's your name? Well, I don't have a name either. But people have called me Keith all my life. It's my calling. You can call it my calling. Well, what's your last name, Keith? I don't have a last name either. Told you I don't have a name. But I was born into the family Little. Or actually I was born into the family Conrady, and then I was later on adopted by the family Little. You want to know the true history of the names. Those would be both my war names, as they're defined by them. Okay, so what's your birth date? I'm sorry I wasn't birthed But I hear I was born on August 20th, 1966. You would have to check somebody else's records. I don't have record of that. That's just what I've been told all my life. See, their words aren't mine. And, something else I want to touch on is, my proof isn't yours and your proof isn't mine either. That's an important word because I get tired of people asking me for proof. What's your proof you don't pay bills? What's your proof you don't perform commerce? How am I supposed to show you that I don't pay bills when I don't have bills? How am I supposed to show you that I don't perform commerce unless you look through every commercial record and find out that I don't perform commerce? You don't find my name on documents anymore, period. Somebody wants to put a name on a document, that's fine. It doesn't have anything to do with me. I didn't put my pen to that fucking paper. I didn't put my ink down. How am I supposed to prove that I rebutted their birth certificate? Am I supposed to show you a public document rebutting it? How about they show you a public document saying it's mine? How about they show a document proving that I took an oath? Or knowingly, wittingly, and intentionally pledged my labor? I don't think anybody can come up with that. You can't even come up with a law that says I have to carry an ID or have an ID so that if you profess to have some kind of probable cause, you can ask me for ID? I have to have an ID to be accused of a crime? Is that what you're telling me? See, they say once they have suspicion that you have to give them some kind of ID, when in fact they have to have articulable suspicion and cause. They have to have articulable cause to even ask for identification. Now, if they have articulable cause to ask for identification, and I don't have identification, and they can't identify me, they're going to arrest me. But even in their system, they still can't identify me properly as a party, because they have to go through a commercial venue. It's a must. So they can only charge me commercially, and they can accuse me under a grand jury indictment. One or the other. Period. So get to understanding this stuff, people. Realize my proof isn't your proof and your proof isn't my proof. Just like my penmanship isn't your penmanship, my signature isn't your signature, their signature isn't my signature, and even if it is a signature, it's not one-to-one communication. It's not common English. It's cursive. You're putting two languages down on, you're putting a second language down on a document that's supposed to be maintained to one, and you're committing the same thing they're doing. It's supposed to come to a one-to-one communication. If you're going to a one-to-one communication, put it to a one-to-one man-to-man situation. Because you can't accept the state definition, the plaintiff definition, and the administrator's definition if they're all three different. How are they all three going to be different? because they're all based on opinions, not law. They're all based on opinion. Opinion according to policy. Policy that only applies to those who are employed under that policy. If you're claiming you owe taxes, you better be a public official or a corporate official. Those are the only two kinds of persons required to pay taxes. Corporate official or public official. Another thing, when we're talking about the DBA, the Minnesota Rule 220, all the 50 states together, each one of them specializes. It's just like a bunch of bar attorneys getting together. One specializes in traffic citations. One specializes in divorce. One specializes in child custody. A doctor specializes in knees. Another doctor specializes in feet. Another doctor specializes in ear, nose, and throat. Another doctor specializes in the eyes. Another doctor specializes in the teeth. We call them dentists. Can't figure that one out. But anyway, still a doctor specializing. The states do the same thing. Minnesota happens to specialize in business. DBA, doing business as, under Minnesota Rule 220. Minnesota Rule 220 follows federal guidelines, thereby doing business as, under federal guidelines, as a United States citizen. Or a corporate person subject to the United States federal guidelines. Whereas if you incorporate yourself under the Belize International Business Corporation and do your private banking on offshore banking accounts through Belize or some other offshore corporate company, nation, then you're not subject to federal rules. You're subject to international union labor laws, which protect your right to privacy. Remember, I told you that's very well. That's the foundation of your First Amendment right to freedom of association. Understand that, people. If you want to do the DBA, that's fine, but make sure you do it properly. Make sure you do it according. If you're going to do it to the United States person, you operate that United States person properly under salvage. Title 31 of the United States Code, sections 1321, subsection 43, I think. Look that one up. Subsection 73 is the one that tells you that the United States Department of State is the fiduciary of decedent estates and trust funds. And under Title 43, Title 31 is trust funds. Title 31, Section 1321 talks about trust funds. And so when we're talking about trust funds, we're talking about public charitable trust fund. And subsection 43 of that title speaks of salvaging. Look that one up. So if you're going to do a DBA under Minnesota Rule 220 as a United States citizen, you better do it under subsection 43 of that title as a salvager. That's your best bet, in my opinion. So doing the DBA Minnesota, that you're following federal guidelines. Therefore, you're subject to federal guidelines. Okay, but if you do your corporate activities under an IBC, International Business Corporation, then you're no longer subject to the federal guidelines unless you're conducting commercial affairs with the federal government. In other words, any government agency, whether it be state or federal, because they're contracted and bound through federal acquisitions regulations to acquire things for each other through the commercial realm. But if you're an international business corporation, you get to help set the terms and conditions of any contracts you construct with those government agencies. This is the problem with the United States citizen. When you're a United States citizen, you're taking benefit of the United States government by providing that United States citizen as a transmitting utility. It's the pass-through account, the Social Security account. That's your all caps name. It's a pass-through account for the trust, public charitable trust account of the United States citizen. State citizen, United States citizen. And if you're using either one of them, you're benefiting from the federal government. Both of them are part of the same construct, and if you're benefiting from them, whether it be food stamps, welfare, marriage licenses could be considered a benefit, depending on how you use it. If you're benefiting through taxation loopholes and stuff, you can still be considered a benefit. So understand this stuff and realize that if you're going to be self-governing, you've got to quit benefiting from that government entity. If you're not going to benefit from it, you have to contract, and that way it's equal benefit. It's shared benefit, shared detriment. If there's a breach of contract, both parties suffer detriment. So in the international law, now you have a national corporation known as the United States in contract with another international corporation known as yourself, whatever you decide to name it. Again, Mark Twain named his international business corporation as Samuel Clemens named his Mark Twain, and he wrote international writings and sold and published international writings under an international business name. Pen name. Penmanship, pen name. So think about this stuff and realize when you get ready to set up your trusts and everything, know what you're doing. If you're going to, again, like I said, if you want to use the Minnesota DBA, go ahead. Feel free, but make sure you're doing it. I believe Iran Lopez is the guy to look up when you do that. He's using it to salvage the American debt. He's using it to salvage the debt. So again, look that one up if you're going to use the DBA Minnesota Rule 220 on the federal level. You can use that very wisely to collect salvage debts coming in, and the state is claiming a debt against a United States citizen. You can salvage that debt as a third party, interested party, as a United States citizen. You're part of that corporation. You're claiming to be part of that corporation. They're granting you the authority to do so through a DBA. They're the ones granting that authority on an international level. Minnesota DBA follows international business laws under their federal regulations. So under an international law, they're claiming that they're going to allow you to do a DBA as a United States citizen. That's granting you the authority to be authorized representative. But make sure that you sign those documents appropriately. Anyway, I hope that helps everybody out. Penmanship is very important, but Common English is the most important. Make sure you get down to your block letters and separate them and make it an art form that they're understood appropriately to correct intent. Everything in law is based on intent. You have to have the mental thought. That's why I say, what's your mental ink? Where's your ink? What ink are you using? And remember, if it weren't for you guys, I wouldn't be doing this. God bless. Love you. Have a great night.